The meta game in an auto battler like Hearthstone Battlegrounds can be volatile and change very rapidly. Oftentimes in games like this, when a full new unit type is added to the game, things can really get shaken up. With the addition of Undeads to Battlegrounds, that statement definitely holds true. You're gonna need to know how these units work, the best way to build around them, and the best way to counter them if you're gonna survive on the ladder. My name is Ethan for The Gamer, and today we're gonna talk all things Undead in Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Hearthstone Battlegrounds Season 3 has introduced a new minion type to the battlefield, Undead. With these new minions comes an entirely new way to play the game. Undead cards rely on a lot of Reborn synergy and some powerful late game cards that can go toe to toe with some of the existing best in-game builds that there are. So in this guide, we're going to cover some of the best Undead builds around and cards that you can use to win games, including when to pick up the cards, good strategies for discovering minions from the tier above, and the sort of boards that you want if you're trying to aim for a first place win. Let's kick this off with the first build and one of the more straightforward ones, the Eternal Knight build. Eternal Knight is a very powerful card. How it works is it's a 4/1 Undead that starts on Tavern Tier 2, and it has +1/+1 for each friendly Eternal Knight that has died this game. So the absolute perfect setup for a powerful Eternal Knight build is to pick these up early. And then you want to level up quickly for the chance of grabbing at least one of the available Eternal Summoners. Eternal Summoner is an insanely powerful card. It's a tier 6 minion, and if you can get one early, it can be very, very, very strong. Even if you haven't been scaling your Eternal Knights for the entire game, picking up an early Eternal Summoner can often just grant you a first place win. Now the ideal board setup for this build is preferably some buffed Risen Riders to act as taunts as they protect your summoners, so that way you can get full value of your summoners. One problem you can run into is running out of board space for all the minions that are going to be spawning out, so making sure you have efficient use of your board space is essential. Another great thing you can do is put in some Soul Splitters so that you can give your summoners Reborn. With more Reborn triggers comes more Eternal Knights. This will allow you to flood the board with gigantic Eternal Knights and help you get that first place spot. The next build we want to cover today is the Sister Death Whisper build. The Sister Death Whisper build is very strong, but it really relies on having a lot of Reborn minions ready to go and a board full of Undead. Minions like Soul Splitter and Handless Forsaken provide fantastic synergy, but even a buffed Death Runner Blanchie will fit nicely into the build. This is a super powerful build and one that is strong enough to where if you get an early Sister Death Whisper, you can fully pivot to an Undead build, even if you haven't been going Undead for the start of the game. One of the biggest downsides though is that if the lobby is stacked with other players who are already picking Undead, you might be in a bit of trouble as they're gonna grab all of the minions you're looking for. But if you see an early Death Whisper, a lot of times it's right to just grab it and pivot to Undead. Next up is the mid-ranged Ghoul of the Feast build. Ghoul of the Feast is a card we didn't really expect to be particularly good, but when used correctly, it can provide a massive tempo swing. This can allow you to level up quickly and grab build-defining cards from higher tavern tiers. Much like the other Undead cards, this does require a bit of synergy. You need to have some units that provide Avenge triggers, but also enough minion types to make this actually worthwhile. Mechs and Beasts work really well with this card alongside other Reborn Undead. Often this is a really strong mid-game build that'll help propel you into the late game, and grab some of the more powerful Tavern Tier 6 minions that'll help you get those first place wins. The final build I want to touch on is an early Hungering Abomination build. If you can grab a Hungering Abomination early, a lot of times this will just guarantee you a top 4 spot in your Battleground lobby. There is a bit of setup involved though in making this card work. The biggest thing is you need to get the card early, and you need to have at least some Avenge synergy ready to go. This doesn't necessarily mean using Reborn minions, but Reborn obviously synergizes well. You could also go with things like Mechs with Menace or Beasts with Rats. One important thing and a huge mistake that can happen with this is you want to make sure you don't solely rely on your Hungering Abomination, but it can be a good way to get some very high stats on a single unit to allow pivots into other late game builds. It can also fit into a late game Reborn Undead build alongside with powerful units like the Sister Death Whisper. Those are some super strong builds, but what do you do if you're running into other Undead builds that you need to beat? Well, here's some good counters to other Undead builds. The Cinderai Straight Shot is the #1 counter to Undead Reborn builds, mostly because a lot of the Reborns also have Taunt. Cinderai removes both Taunt and Reborn, which can cripple some of the other builds we talked about. The Reborn mechanic is key to a lot of Undead builds, and just having one of these units a lot of times can just defeat them outright. If you don't have a Sindori or don't want to use it, other things you can look for are big cleave units. So running something like a stacked elemental build with elemental wildfire can really wreak havoc on builds that rely on multiple reborns. Mega Wind Fury elementals are also quite strong at taking out minions that are buffed mid-battle. So there you have it. There's our guide to all things Undead in Hearthstone Battlegrounds and all the knowledge you should need to secure those top 4 spots and climb the ladder. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful. Also, make sure you check out thegamer.com for all things gaming, and we'll see you in the next video.